Captain Franz at the helm so steer. Gather round the partnership's deck, Schrepf's command. Tales from the leaders of the partnership train. So we chant by the podcast glow. Through veritable seas to boxes flow. Dar dive, hoist the sail.
All right, welcome everybody to another episode of The Partnership. Today we are joined by Delya Jansen, who is the CEO of Partner Utopia. And Delya has 15 years of experience building partner programs at companies like NetApp, Zoomdata, and Snowflake. And so I'm incredibly excited to talk about a topic today that is pretty dear to me, which is how to pick your partner goals. We already teased it in the title, like you're setting the wrong partner goals. And today I want to discuss with Delya, like what are the wrong partner goals and especially what are the right partner goals? So incredibly excited to have you on, Delya. And with that, maybe we start straight away with a question like, what are the wrong partner goals? And what happens
The wrong
if you
partner. Yeah, I think okay. So the wrong partner goals are the ones, and I think that's pretty obvious, the ones that you cannot measure, or the ones that partner is not going to deliver anyway. What happens, right? So the question is really, what happens if you choose the wrong partner goals? I'm not a fortune teller, so it could very well be that nothing bad happens, and it's going to be amazing, and you landed this unicorn partner, and it's just like things are just moving smoothly, right? Most likely, what will happen is some sort of a failure at the end. And this is what I've witnessed. This is what I've experienced. Is when a wrong goal is set, the partnership can fail in a few different ways. One, it just never gets off the ground, right? Neither one of you guys are delivering what is expected, so things just don't get off the ground. The other thing that could happen is that it gets off the ground, but especially internally, so you think that you're delivering on something and the partner is like, yeah, we're delivering on this. But because it wasn't communicated correctly, different departments in your organizations are expecting things out of the partner that you never intended for this partner to deliver. So now you look bad, basically, right? Example, you set a partnership down like a salesy goal, and we'll get into more details exactly what the goals are. And all of a sudden your CMO is popping up. You're like, hey, why aren't they putting like joint marketing funds into doing events? Hey, why won't they just, let us present at their event, or just all kinds of things, right? And you're rambling on and you're trying to explain to the marketing person, well, like, why would they? But again,
That's not what they do.
Yeah, like, why? This wasn't the plan. But then how would a marketing person know that, right? So you should have like set the goals so that you and the partner are executing. Internally, the right teams are expecting the right things, and the wrong teams are leaving you alone, essentially, right? And that the growth is maximized, right? Because again, in the beginning, it's almost easy to do what we call press release partnerships, right? Like, yeah, everything is wonderful, blah, 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 right? What happens 6 months into it? How are you actually maximizing the growth and getting the most out of that partnership? So we've seen partnerships fail for those three reasons when the wrong goals have been set.
Yeah, I get that. Like, it reminds me a lot of also a time at Hopin where we partnered with, for example, a virtual photo booth app, which people could install in their virtual events. And then we, talked to his partner, and the partner was like, oh, we can send you leads as well. Like, let's advertise you. And it never worked out. And like, everybody was like, why are they sending us no leads? And it just turns out that like you make the purchase decision of your virtual events platform first, and then you make your purchase decision for all the entertainment and all the like activities and so forth afterwards, right? And so the wrong partner goals could also just be based on like what the partner can actually deliver. Like, where in the purchase decision or in the user journey, like, do these partners show up, right? I don't know if you have a story on like a time that you picked the wrong goal for your partners.
That one, actually, I realized that part early on, and been pretty successful in that. So maybe I'll talk about more of a success, right? So exactly what you just described, the buyer journey right? So how does this, especially in the world that we live in, which is very SaaS world, right? Every company does one thing very, very well, but the customer has to go buy 20 things to solve a business problem, not like an individual buyer problem, but a business problem. So when you realize what is your technology, so let's say you're on the vendor side, okay, I'm working for a database company. Okay, so when a database purchasing decision happens, who makes that decision, and all the decisions that happen before and all the decisions that happen after. So where are you in that buying life cycle for the customer? So when you look at your ecosystem, instead of like a lot of people represent an ecosystem as a bubble or some sort of like a round thing. I think the right way to look at a partner ecosystem is actually linear, a very, very linear, and maybe few things kind of pop in here and there, but usually if you can line them up and say, this is the decision that customer makes right before they decide on me, and right after. So then all your partnerships then for everything that's to the before you, right? Left or right, which way you so all the decisions that happen before you, that's a partnership that you could expect lead generation, because that's the partnership that now has the ear and the attention of a customer to go recommend the next thing. So if you're selling a database, a partnership with a visualization company, right? If you're Snowflake and you partner with Tableau, well, Tableau cannot give you leads because that's on you, right? To then go the other way. But you could be expecting other things. You could be expecting integrations. You could be expecting stickier customer development. You could be expecting brand awareness, especially if that other company is bigger. But yeah, you just really have to figure out where are you aligned, and therefore, what is the actual expectation from how you guys are going to work together.
Yeah, that's such an interesting insight. Like the way I always visualize it is like as the SaaS buying river. So like leads only flow downstream because there's like different steps and
Yeah.
like the leads will only flow down. But I've never thought about visualizing an ecosystem as a line instead of like a bubble. Like you have the ecosystem Let Growth book next to you from Bob Moore. Shout out to Bob Moore and the Crossbeam team.
Yes,
I read
absolutely.
the book; it's great. And they're also like ecosystems are always bubbles. But I do understand that as a customer, that's actually not how it works. Like you're not inside of this bubble. Actually, it's like like sequential. Like there's like
Mhm.
different steps that your customers or your leads have to go through, and so there's a different order in which all these partners work together, rather than all just like in one big blurb.
Yeah.
Before we continue, I also want to give a shout out to Jennifer, who's joining us from Stamford, Connecticut. At least I think that CT is Connecticut. I'm still new to the States. But great to see you here, Jennifer, and thank you for taking the time. If you or anybody in the audience have questions today, like feel free to drop them in the comments, and we'll also show them on screen and discuss them with Delia live. So we talked a little bit about like what the wrong partner goals look like and why it's important to set the right partner goals. Like, how do you set the right partnership goals?
Yeah. You know what? We're actually, I'd love to hear people's feedback. So here's my one opinion. We've tested this with over 300 partner managers worldwide, and it seems to track, but we're constantly improving it because that's a very critical question for us to answer for what we're building. So here's what we are so far. But again, if anybody has any feedback or comments, let me know. So far, what we boiled it down to is whatever you do, do not say revenue, especially for partnerships that are tech to tech when there is no revenue exchange, right? All partnerships should impact revenue, but that is measured in a very different way. So we're talking about, again, just 15 years of my experience, right? If a quarter into me getting hired for a brand new company or getting put on a different project, if within a quarter, at least one team in that company cannot articulate my value for what I'm doing for that team, and that's usually sales, marketing, or product, right? Then something is off. So I took that experience and said, okay, so it is usually sales, marketing, or product, right? Product/engineering, maybe. So what did these guys need, and how was I able to show immediate results from brand new partners within a quarter or less? And the setting of the goals kind of came from that. So I said, okay, realistically speaking, any partner is going to, one, deliver some sort of a customer expansion goal, either brand new logos that are easy to measure or expansion within existing logos. Let's say you were selling to an IT buyer, now you're selling to the business user, right? Some sort of an expansion. All of that is very easily tracked in even the worst CRMs in the world. And luckily, there are amazing CRMs out there now. So that's one, like some sort of a customer expansion is one. The other one is brand awareness. And the brand awareness, again, could be measured in some sort of a top of a funnel approach, right? are marketing people now getting more leads since this partnership has started? And can you track those leads to the partners? Again, with all this custom URLs, landing pages, all that's super easy to track, right? Did we now increase our funnel and do those leads assign to this partner or a set of partners that we just created? You can also measure in website traffic and a few other ways, but very easy to set up, very easy to measure. So you have some sort of customer expansion, you have some sort of brand awareness, right? And then the final one, for my favorite people is the product guys and engineering. And that usually comes with some sort of an integration, so some sort of technical advancement, right? Did we create an integration together? Did the partner submit it? Did we submit it? In open source world is also really good, right? Like who committed code when, and then, but you don't stop there. What you really measure is not who did what, is how many customers are actually now using that feature, right? Did you become now stickier within your customers because of that feature, because the customer is now relying on that integration in order to use the two of you, and the chances of them unsubscribing to one or the other platform are now much lower. So you reduce your churn and you kind of create that stickiness. So there it is. So there are three goals, right? Customer expansion, brand awareness, and technical advancement. Those are the three that we set together. And when we're working with the customers, we get them to that particular stage where we say, okay, what is your partnership goal? And we only give them those three, and we're only letting them select one at a time. That's another key thing, is pick one. You can add on later once you've proven success, or once you say, yeah, listen, this was the wrong goal, but the right company, let's start from scratch. And you really got to start from scratch, right? So one goal at a time.
Yeah. That's so true. Like focus is the most important thing in partnerships, because a partnership could be anything, and it can do like there are so many partnerships opportunities that if you don't focus, you're just going to drown in like opportunities and like trying to grasp for straws. But I do have to say, like as a former CEO, like when I first heard your sentence of like the main goal is not revenue, it kind of like irked together. I was, ugh.
I
Like,
know.
like
It's hard.
my worry is always with partnerships people that we're like so smart, and we like go to like the CEO and we go like, you're doing it wrong. You're not, this is not about revenue. This is about like brand awareness, or this is about having relationships in the industry and so forth. And like, how do you sell a CEO on these goals? How do you sell a CEO that he should not focus on revenue? And I think you kind of like mentioned it now, like all these things do drive revenue, but like, how do you make sure that this kind of message lands with the CEO?
So, okay, let me correct it. It's not that the goal is not revenue. Revenue
Yeah.
is not an immediately measurable result. So yes, there is a revenue impact, but how? Again, let's say, so the goal is always going to be a revenue impact, but you're going to measure it in different ways. So again, if your goal was customer expansion, the revenue impact is going to be measured in net new logos or customer expansion within existing customers, right? What you want to avoid is that if you're in a meeting with that CEO and you sold them on this partnership for customer expansion, the reports that you're going to be giving and the presentations that you're going to be doing is with your sales team, is with your CRO or VP of sales. You're sitting there together, and that VP of sales is hopefully going like, Delya is awesome. We just added 5 new accounts that we had no business talking to, or Delya is awesome because we are able now to sell into 4 other organizations, right? You do not have your CMO in that meeting, because if the CMO walks into that meeting, they're like, Delya is horrible. Her partners gave me no marketing funds. They're not willing to do any of the events with us. They're not driving any leads. Well, okay, but you don't belong in this meeting, Mr. CMO, right? Flip, if it's brand awareness, you have your CMO be like, hey, this partnership is committing or impacting our revenue because our top of the funnel has increased. The CMO, again, Delya is awesome because all of these marketing things are now happening. My job is so much easier. All of these wonderful things marketing things are happening. Yay, this is how it's impacting revenue. Again, I don't have to. So it goes on,
Yeah.
right? So you don't have your VP of engineering and VP of product who's going to go like, Delya is horrible, or her partners are not committing any code, or they're not doing any integration with us, or their support team won't answer our calls. Again, you don't belong in this meeting. So absolutely revenue impact, but the focus on how you measure and track that.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it. Yeah, I think it's so interesting because it aligns also back to a question which I in my early days in partnerships always had, is like, where does the partnerships team sit in an organization? And it kind of like depends on the goals of the partnerships team and the function they support, right? Because it was so weird. Every time I talked to like a partnerships professional, I was like, well, where do you sit in the org? And they're like, I'm under marketing. I'm under like, product. I'm under like corporate development. And the reason is just that their goals have to align very tightly with the department they're sitting under, right? And so to your point, like if you sit in the product department, like you have no business driving leads for the marketing team, ideally. I mean, like maybe in the future, maybe like if you like figured out the product side so well that you can add on later, as you already alluded to. But yeah, you want to make sure that you drive the goals of the department you sit in rather than like, some arbitrary goals for each department, which is kind of spread you too thin.
Well, tangent thing, shout out to partnership leaders for driving the concept of a CPO, the product guys are probably mad, but
Yeah.
chief partner officer, because I think these goals, like setting up these specific goals, is going to be that much more important once the CPO role is starting to get elevated. And we are now being hired under a team that's got to sit at the table in front of the CEO. So now we don't belong into marketing. We're not these orphans, right? Kind of being spread around the whole company and trying to pretend to fulfill goals of whoever our king is at that point, right? So now
Yeah.
that we have our own little kingdom that we've created, it's going to be that much more important to set the right goals, because you could have 5 different partnerships delivering on 3 different goals, but what are they? So yeah, just really happy about this new movement.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's also the one way to like, kind of bring all these different goals together in the end. Even though I feel like in order to make partnerships successful at your company, you still need to start with one department, one goal, align with them tightly, and then kind of spread out. Before
Yep.
we move on, I wanted to quickly give a shout out to Steve, who's joining us from St. Louis today, and also to Mihai, who's joining us from his bedroom. No, living room, not bedroom. I'm like in the spare bedroom, home office style, but living room sounds way more comfortable. So thank you for tuning in today. And if you have any questions, just drop them in the chat or emojis. We also like emojis around here. Now, so we kind of talked about this a little bit, but I do want to dive into it more because we recently had Nick Valuri from Dropbox on, and we talked about tech partnerships. And one of the questions which came up over and over from the audience was like, how do you even measure the impact of tech partnerships? Because I feel like with marketing and like with sales partnerships, like it's easier to tie it back to revenue, which is ultimately what the CEO always wants. But with product, it's not necessarily a revenue driving initiative, or at least not always. So how do you measure the impact of these partnerships?
Okay, let's clarify tech partnerships really quickly. So in my world, everything that I've discussed, it is a tech partnership because it's different than the channel reselling. So it's 2 technology companies depending on each other to do something in order to expand their revenue impact, but neither one of them are selling to each other. So there's no monetary exchange, right? There's a come together. That's not
Yeah.
what you're saying. I think you're describing tech partnership when the purpose of it is what I was describing, like technical advancement, right? So you're doing integrations, you're doing something that advances each other's roadmap. Is that what you mean?
Yes, that's correct. So, let's just make it more concrete. Like at Hopin, for example, we partnered with HubSpot. Like,
Yep.
how would you
Yeah.
measure the impact of this tech partnership between like a virtual events platform and HubSpot, for example?
Um, Again, so it depends, right? So what did you partner together for? Did you partner to expand customers? Did you partner to expand brand awareness? Or did you partner for that technical advancement? So if you partner together for technical advancement because you do this thing and then they do this thing and the customer has to buy the 2 together anyway, so you might as well talk to each other and you might as well find a way to integrate with each other, so then you become stickier. So then when possible, you're measuring some sort of a technical connection integration. But that's
Yeah.
not always an option. Sometimes you're sitting over here and they're sitting over here, and there's just no way to actually integrate into each other, right? So there's no way to plug it in. So
Yeah.
there's not an engineering code answer to this where I am going to write this and I'm going to write this. There are a few other things that you can do around it. One example would be, I'll give you an example. When I was at NetApp, right, we had something where at that time we were moving Windows workloads onto AWS, right? AWS loved us, but they're like, this is a very complicated thing. It takes, months and hours or whatever, right? It's super expensive, never gonna work, right? Great idea, never gonna work. Well, we found these consultancy agencies, and these consultancy agencies, yes, they charge a lot of money per hour, but they also wanted some sort of differentiation, right? Like, how do we go compete with the Accentures when we like a 10-person consultancy agency? What we discussed with them is essentially writing a quick start button to say, listen, whenever your customers do need to move Windows to AWS, just go ahead and give them a button. So you have these like then when the 2 come, so there's nothing that NetApp and AWS could have done together necessarily to solve that problem, but the consultancy agency could. So you could find these other like in-between companies that could do like quick start buttons. And it could be, again, they ended up actually coding around it, but it could be like a reference architecture or something where you are still describing to the client how can you use the two products together and removing as much of the work for the client as possible. You're making it so simple with a button or with just really well documented architectures. So that's example. I mean, I can go on and on with many different examples, but you're basically looking at bridging the two technologies together and measuring that the customers are using those technologies. Now that part is easy, right? You could actually, if you have the button, like how many customers are pressing on it. If you have an architecture, how many customers are downloading it and actually implementing it. So the measurement is actually the easiest part. It's coming up with a creative way to write into each other's technical value prop.
Yeah. Got it. Steve in the audience actually mentioned like a couple of suggestions on what one could measure as well. And so one is like how many mutual customers are leveraging the integration and how does the CSAT of those customers compare to overall averages? And so
Yeah.
these are all kind of like customer expansion focused, right? These are all focused on your existing customer base and then like either trying to expand or retain those customers. And that's kind of like the initial gut reflex we had as well when we actually partnered, for example, with HubSpot, right? We looked at like how many customers are installing it and like what is their retention rate or what is their CSAT compared to all the other customers. And we saw a clear line that like, okay, these customers are more likely to be retained if they install, right? But I always feel like that's a bit of a red herring with partnerships. Because yes, you can say like these customers are more likely to be retained if they installed an integration, but maybe they were already the customers who really liked your product and like actually went for the extra effort of installing an integration and so forth. And so maybe like an integration install is more of a lagging indicator rather than like a leading indicator. As in like it just shows you that these customers like your product. It doesn't show you that this customer is going to be retained because of the integration, right? I think my take on this question as well, just to share that, is ultimately that for a HubSpot, which in this case, as we discussed before, in a linear ecosystem is like a node which is earlier in the purchase, flow than, for example, our virtual events platform. For them, it will be more around, these kind of product metrics, like how many customers install, what is their CSAT, what is the retention, etc. But HubSpot has has the ability to send us leads because we're further down in the ecosystem. And so for us, it should still be like some sort of revenue generation. It should still be some sort of like shared use case that we have, customer case success stories, co-selling activity, and so forth. And so I think, the answer to this question of like, how do you measure the impact of tech partnerships is probably it really depends on where you are in that linear ecosystem. I really love that. Like,
exactly.
the fact that the ecosystem is like linear makes so much more sense than a blob.
It's just chaotic to me when it's a blob, and I am a very linear person. So yeah, when I realized that it used to be this way, but I'm glad that you say that as well. I mean, to your earlier point, I feel like it's like dealing with any data and statistics, right? There are levels of assumptions that you just have to make and create and be comfortable with the kind of the error that you're making in those assumptions. And if you have a big enough sample pool, you say, hey, we're going to go ahead and assume that the lack of churn or reduction of churn is because of these integrations. If you really want to know, go talk to every customer and ask them, right? But who's got time to do that? Couple of ways, and again, just kind of when we were looking at, okay, so another example, NetApp, I think, yeah, NetApp. Okay, so we were trying to figure out for their cloud product, was this driven by the channel partners? We would have companies like CDW as the number one selling product partner of NetApp Cloud. All right, so on paper, that looked amazing, right? But then when we realized, we were like, how come every time I talk to anybody at CDW, they have no idea that we even have a cloud product? Like, where is the mismatch? So this is where sometimes, yes, you can look at the data and be like, yep, CDW is the number one cloud partner, and just move on with your day. Fine, whatever, right? But we were starting to see that this excitement was creating almost like an inflation of how we thought of a lot of our partners. And I just had this gut feeling that things are just going to go south really freaking quickly. We're going to have issues with churn. We're going to have issues with unsubscribing. We're going to have all these issues. So having that feeling, I did not trust the data. And I literally just went and did a sample pool. I talked to like 40 sales reps within that were tagged on those deals, and they had no idea that we had it. I'm like, what the hell's going on? Anyway, dug deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And although on paper, CDW looked like our number one partner, in reality, they were like not even, they shouldn't even been on the list, right? So yeah, sometimes trust the data and move on with your life if that makes it. But if you get that gut feeling that something's up with the data, go talk to the human beings. This is what we do
Yeah.
in partnerships. You just have to go talk to another human being and find out what the hell's going on.
Yeah. You gotta do qualitative and quantitative to figure out what's actually happening. That's such a great story. Like, what was happening, if you don't mind sharing? Like,
Yeah.
how come like the data was so wrong?
This is when the salesperson was not allowed in a meeting with me, because what they were doing is they created, this took a long time to figure out. Sales team or the finance people have created a spiff for the salespeople that whenever they would add a cloud product to a hardware resale, they would get additional, whatever commission. So salespeople being great at making money, right? They're so good at making money. This is why we have them. This is why we're building. I love them. But when you're going to set the wrong goals for your salespeople, that will result in essentially just adding products onto each deal that neither the customer nor the partner even knew that was on it, it's going to give you some really bad data. And that's exactly what happened, right? So it seemed like for about a year and a half, there was a spike in that sale, just like inflation, but the problem started, but it took another 2 quarters to feel the issue of the problem when nobody resubscribed to that product. And it went like this, and it went like down.
Wow.
And this is where me and my team came up, and we're like, CDW is not your number one cloud partner. These consultancy companies, hence why I learned how to work with a consultancy company, so that like those guys are, right? Yeah, they're not going to give you 100 deals a month. They're going to give you 2, but that 2 is not only going to stay, it's going to grow substantially.
Yeah. That's such an important lesson, right? Like, show me the incentives and I show you the results. Like, the incentives were just completely misaligned.
Yep. Which happens a lot in
Wow.
partnerships.
It happens so much because it's confusing. Like, people set the wrong goals, which is why we're hosting this session.
Yep.
So I wanted to cover one question because I want to make sure that we get that in before we wrap up the show. How do you communicate your goals? Because it seems like these goals are really important to communicate internally and externally to make sure you have your CMO in the meeting and not the CRO, for example, depending on what your goals are. But how do you make sure that everybody is on board with these goals?
Again, first of all, you communicate it to everybody, right? For the ones whose business you'll be driving, and for the ones whose business you will not be driving, for now or forever, right? So again, you're going to put together, it's like, okay, here are the 5 partners I'm going to bet on, right? Their goals are all going to be aligned to net new customer. So here, salesperson, are we good? CRO, like, are we good? We're good to go. Okay, now let me go communicate it through the whole company to say, we're doing these partnerships and these are the goals that you're driving. If the marketing person raises their hand, be like, where are my goals? Not gonna happen. But maybe the market will be like, hey, this is great. Like, when you're done, when you succeed with it, would you mind like that we do extra things? Absolutely, right? We'll come to you when we're ready. Same thing for the product. So I think a communication to other departments whose goals you're not driving, but who are aware of you and know you, especially in a smaller company, let them know. Set their expectations right as well.
Yeah. So important, right? I feel, especially with partner goals, I feel like the harsher you are in the beginning, the easier we'll get afterwards. Like,
Yes.
you need to be very, very harsh in the beginning and say, like, listen, Mr. CMO, I'm not going to drive anything for you. Like, this is not what we do here. And then that's going to be harsh, but then they have time to go do something else and don't waste, their time trying to chase you up and trying to get leads from you, right? And so you just got to be really firm in the beginning, and that makes your life then so much easier afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. And if you get fired for it, then you're in the wrong company. I hope you don't, but
well, if you get fired for it, then you're not in the wrong company anymore. So you can also then move on to the better company.
exactly.
So everybody
Exactly.
wins. Okay. Before we leave, you're wearing the Partner Utopia shirt. Partner Utopia is going to be launched next month at Catalyst, which I'm super excited about. I'm going to be there as well. Going to give a short presentation. I'm going to see your launch. We're going to meet in person again, which I'm very excited about as well. But can you give the audience like a quick teaser on what Partner Utopia actually is?
Yeah, so we're building a platform that solves the strategy part of the partner creation lifecycle. So if you look at the lifecycle, again, linear, because I'm very linear, there is a strategy, like let's think of what we're doing. Then there's an execution. Let's go do these things. And the execution usually falls into co-selling, reselling, co-marketing, whatever. And let's go measure results, right? So when we went looking for a solution that helped us the entire life cycle, what we found is that there were so many awesome PEP platforms that help with the execution. There were so many amazing PRM companies that help with the results, but there was nothing that was helping the strategy point. And we were trying to figure out, why do more than half of the partnerships fail? And why does it take freaking 18 months to go from nothing to something? And we went and talked to a bunch of other people, and it looked like it all fell into the fact that on the strategy side, everything is done manually. It is labor intensive, it is confusing, it is risky. So we set out to solve that problem. Like, you know what? This stage has been ignored for so long. It's about time that it comes with automation, with really intelligence and AI behind it, to make sure that it doesn't take 18 months and 50% of the partnerships don't fail. That maybe 99% of the partnerships succeed, can't really claim 100, and that it maybe takes a few months to at least prove or disprove the value of the partnership and move on. So that's what we're building. We're launching one tiny little feature at Catalyst, which is come up to our booth. You'll be able to generate a joint value proposition of any partner of your choice. You can come in here. I mean, you can even say like, hey, I want a joint value proposition with a Barbie manufacturer. But we're testing our AI of how good it is to actually generate a joint value proposition that takes sometimes 3 to 4 months in seconds, where we understand about you, we understand about your partner, we understand your goals. Again, I'm going to ask you, what is the goal of the partnership? Because a joint value proposition should represent what is the goal of the partnership. And then we spit it out. And then you just get to tell us this is good, bad, and then get to know us. And I'm also teaching a yoga class.
And you're teaching the partnerships yoga class?
It's just a yoga class. It's just I think on Thursday at 7 a.m. there's going to be a whole fitness theme to the event, which I'm excited about. And they've asked me to teach a yoga class. So come check it out if you're up for 7 a.m. yoga.
Awesome. Well, you heard it here first. If you're going to Catalyst next month, make sure to drop by Delya's booth or join the 7 a.m. yoga class. And if people want to learn more about your journey, where can they follow you?
PartnerUtopia.com. That's where we are actually onboarding right now waitlist users, and soon we'll be converting to a free trial. So sign up for a free trial or sign up for a waitlist right now. And then just on LinkedIn, Delya Jansen, just find me on LinkedIn, add me. I'm posting all kinds of things all the time.
Awesome. And I really like Jennifer's comment to wrap it all up. Like, working in partnerships requires flexibility. So the yoga class is really on point.
Yes.
And with
thank
that,
you.
this was our show for today. Thank you so much for joining us, Delya. Also, thank you to everybody who joined us in the audience today. Jennifer, Steve, Mihai, really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today. We will be back in 2 weeks, and after that, we'll take a summer break for Catalyst. But until then, see you in 2 weeks. Bye, everybody.
Hark now, mates, lend an ear.
Hear us now.
Captain Franz at the helm, so steer. Gather round the partnership's deck.
Schrepf's command.
Tales from the leaders of the partnership train. So we chant by the podcast glow. Through wearable seats to boxes flow. Dar-o-die, hoist the sail.